No, not this. Not now.
It's over. Sign it.
Please, not now, I beg you!
What would you do if the man you stood beside when he had nothing, the man you defended when even his own family rejected him, finally clawed his way back to power and divorced you? What would you do if you had just given birth to his twins, alone in a cold hospital room, and he never visited once, never brought flowers, never even called to ask if you were alive? And what if on your way home from that hospital, too weak to walk, too broke to afford a taxi, carrying 2 newborns on your chest, the first luxury car that stopped in front of you was his? And inside that car sat the woman he chose over you and the mother who orchestrated your destruction. Welcome to Black Diamond Stories, where we bring you tales of betrayal, karma, and redemption. If you love stories that touch the soul, hit that subscribe button and stay with us until the very end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Heavy rain was pouring down as she walked slowly along the muddy roadside. Her name was Grace Morgan, a 32-year-old Black American woman from Atlanta, Georgia. Grace had moved to Seoul 5 years ago, chasing a dream of teaching English and experiencing a new culture. She was the kind of woman who radiated warmth even in her darkest moments, the kind who saw good in people long after they stopped deserving it. Her friends back home used to say she had too much faith in broken things, always believing she could fix what others had abandoned. Now, just 3 days after giving birth, that unshakable faith was being tested in the cruelest way possible. 2 newborn twins were strapped to her chest in a worn cloth carrier. One small hospital bag hung from her trembling hand. No umbrella, soaked to the bone. Her face was exhausted and pale, struggling to breathe. Each step sent sharp pain through her body, reminders of the childbirth wounds still fresh. She stopped and leaned against a lamppost. Her legs were shaking uncontrollably. One baby started crying softly. She whispered, "SHH, Mommy's got you, we're almost home." But she didn't know where home was anymore. The sound of a luxury car engine approached slowly. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class rolled to a stop in front of her. Tinted windows gleamed in the rain. For 1 second, hope flashed in her eyes. Maybe he came. Maybe he remembered. The window rolled down. Inside the car sat her husband in the driver's seat, a man named Min-jun. Minjun was 35, born and raised in the dangerous underworld of Seoul's organized crime families. His name meant strong and handsome, and he had once lived up to it before pride rotted him from within. He had a sharp jawline, cold eyes that used to hold warmth for Grace, and an expensive suit that now defined his worth more than his character. Beside him in the passenger seat sat his ex-girlfriend, Park Jae-woo. Jae-woo was 33, a calculating woman from a wealthy Seoul family. Her name meant wisdom and protection, but she wielded both like weapons. Elegant makeup framed a beautiful face that had mastered the art of looking innocent while destroying lives. Her designer handbag probably cost more than Grace's entire month of living expenses. She adjusted the rearview mirror to look at Grace with barely hidden contempt. In the back seat sat the true architect of this nightmare, Minjun's mother, Kang Hae-jin. Hae-jin was 61, a woman whose name meant grace and treasure, yet she possessed neither. She was the widow of a mid-level Mafia boss, a woman who had clawed her way through poverty in her youth only to become the very thing she once feared, someone who measured human worth by bloodline and bank accounts. Her face was a mask of venom as she stared at Grace through the window. Silence filled the air except for the rain pounding the roof of the car. Min-jun didn't speak. He just stretched out his hand. An envelope dropped into the muddy rainwater at Grace's feet. He said coldly, "Sign it. You're free now. Go start over." Jae-woo smirked, looking straight ahead, savoring her victory. But it was Hae-jin who leaned forward from the back seat, unable to contain her hatred any longer. Her voice was dripping with poison as she said in Korean, knowing Grace understood enough to feel every word, "You were a stain on our family from the beginning, a curse that brought shame to our name. My son wasted years on you, years he could have spent building his empire with someone worthy. Look at you, pathetic, standing in the rain like the beggar you always were. You should be grateful we're giving you this mercy. Go back to your people, back to where you came from. You never belonged here, and you never will." Grace's voice trembled as she said, "Here now, you're doing this here after everything." Min-jun replied flatly, "I've already moved on, you should too, this was a mistake from the start." Grace said desperately, "Wait, please, just talk to me, just tell me what I did wrong." but the car window started rolling up. Hyejin's final words cut through the rain like a blade. You were born wrong, that's what you did. The car accelerated. Mud and rainwater splashed all over Grace and the babies. One twin started crying louder. She stumbled back, gasping for air. The car disappeared into the rain, red taillights fading like dying embers. Grace stood frozen for a moment that felt like eternity. Then slowly, painfully, she bent down, picked up the envelope from the filthy water, opened it with shaking hands. Divorce papers, pre-signed by Minjun, awaiting her signature. She stared at it. No tears came, just emptiness. Just the sound of rain and her babies crying and the weight of a world that had finally crushed her. A stranger's car pulled up beside her moments later. An older man with a kind face and graying hair stepped out with an umbrella. His name was Kim Sang-hoon, a 68-year-old retired investment banker. Sang-hoon's name meant always reaching higher, and he had spent his life doing exactly that, but unlike others, he had never forgotten where he came from. He had grown up poor in Busan, built his fortune through honest work, and now in retirement, he spent his days helping those the world had discarded. He said gently, "Miss, are you okay? You need help. Please let me take you somewhere safe." Grace nodded weakly, too broken to speak. He helped her into his car, placing his jacket over her shoulders. As they drove away, she looked back at the road one last time, watching the place where her marriage had died. But this story didn't begin in the rain. It began 5 years earlier in a dark, cramped apartment in a rundown part of Seoul. Minjun sat on the floor, head in his hands, broken and defeated. He was once a rising star in the Kang family syndicate, a criminal organization that controlled gambling, protection rackets, and smuggling operations across 3 districts. But Minjun made a critical mistake. He trusted his closest friend with a major drug shipment deal. That friend betrayed him, took the money, and vanished. Minjun was blamed for the loss. He was stripped of his rank, his power, and his money. His allies turned their backs. His respect evaporated overnight. Now he was nothing, just another failure living in poverty and shame. His phone buzzed. A message from his girlfriend at the time, the same Jaiwoo who now sat in his passenger seat. The text said, "I can't do this anymore, you're going nowhere. Don't contact me again, I deserve better than this." She blocked him immediately. He threw his phone across the room and screamed into the silence. There was a knock on the door. He opened it, ready to curse whoever dared disturb his misery. It was Grace. They had met 3 months earlier at a language exchange meetup. She was teaching English to Korean students, and he had attended to improve his business communication. She had smiled at him that first night, a smile so genuine it disarmed him. She didn't know about his criminal ties, didn't care about his family name. She just saw a man struggling with verb tenses and offered to help. Now she stood at his door holding groceries, her face full of concern. She said softly, "I brought food, you haven't eaten in 2 days, I was worried about you." Minjun responded bitterly, "Why do you keep coming here? I have nothing to give you, I'm nobody, I'm nothing." Grace smiled softly and said, "I'm not here for what you can give me. I'm here because I believe in you. I see something in you that you can't see right now." He looked at her, confused and suspicious. He said, "You don't even know me. You don't know what I've done." She replied, "I know enough. You're not a quitter. You're just lost right now. And that's okay. Everyone gets lost sometimes." She walked past him, set the groceries down, and started cooking. Minjun watched her move around his tiny kitchen like she belonged there, humming softly to herself, and for the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel like a tomb. For the next 2 years, Grace became his anchor. She worked 2 jobs, teaching English during the day and waitressing at night, to support them both. She defended him when her coworkers mocked her for dating a broke Korean man with a suspicious past. She gave him her savings, nearly $4,000 she had been keeping for emergencies, so he could pay off debts to dangerous people. She stayed awake with him at night when he was anxious, angry, and broken, rubbing his back and telling him that failure wasn't final. She wrote in her diary late at night, "They say love is sacrifice. I never understood that until I met Minjun. He doesn't love me the way I love him. I can see it in his eyes, but I believe one day he will. I believe love can be built brick by brick, and I'm willing to lay every brick if it means we build something beautiful together." Minjun proposed to Grace on a cold December evening, not out of love, out of obligation. He said, "You've done so much for me. You've sacrificed everything. It's only right that I marry you. It's the honorable thing to do." Grace asked hesitantly, searching his face for truth. Do you love me, Minjun? He paused for too long and finally said, I respect you deeply. I'm grateful for everything. And that's more than most people have in a marriage. We can build something real from that. Grace wanted to ask more, wanted to demand the words she desperately needed to hear, but she swallowed her doubt. She accepted because she believed love could grow from respect, because she believed her faith in him would eventually be returned. Their wedding was small and quiet. His mother, Hyjin, attended, but her face was stone cold throughout the entire ceremony. She wore black as if attending a funeral instead of a wedding. She whispered to relatives in Korean, making no effort to hide her disgust. She trapped him. This foreign woman trapped my son when he was vulnerable. This is why our family is cursed. Mark my words, nothing good will come from this union. Grace didn't understand every word, but she felt the hostility in every glance, every whisper, every deliberate exclusion from family conversations. She smiled anyway, held Min-jun's hand tightly, and hoped that time would soften his mother's heart. She was wrong. 2 years into their marriage, things started shifting like tectonic plates beneath the surface. Min-jun reconnected with an old ally in the syndicate, a man who owed him a favor from years ago. A risky deal came up involving a shipment of luxury cars stolen from Japan. Grace encouraged him despite her moral reservations, saying, "Take it, I believe in you, you can do this, you can get back everything you lost." She even offered the last of her savings, another $3,000 she had scraped together. Minjun took the deal. It worked beyond anyone's expectations. Money started flowing again like water breaking through a dam. New suits replaced his worn clothes. A new Mercedes appeared in their driveway. New confidence returned to his voice. Respect came flooding back from former allies. Invitations to exclusive gatherings arrived daily. Power dynamics shifted, and people who once ignored him now bowed deeply when he passed. But something else changed too, something darker. His ego began to grow, fed by every success, every victory, every person who told him he was destined for greatness. Minjun started coming home late, sometimes not until 3 or 4 in the morning. Grace would wait up, dinner cold on the table, worry etched into her face. She said gently one night, "You've been working so hard, I barely see you anymore, I miss you." He replied dismissively without even looking up from his phone, "This is what success looks like. This is the price of power, you wouldn't understand these things." Grace said softly, "I just miss talking to you, miss feeling like we're partners." He snapped, "Don't be clingy. I don't have time for this emotional neediness right now." She pulled back, hurt and confused, wondering when the man she saved had become someone she didn't recognize. Hyjin started visiting their home more frequently now that money had returned to the family. She would sit in their living room, drinking tea that Grace prepared, and speak to Minjun in rapid Korean, deliberately excluding Grace from conversations. She would say, "Now that you have money and power again, you need to think carefully about your image. People in our world are talking, and what they're saying isn't good for business." Minjun asked, "Talking about what? What are people saying?" Hyjin glanced at Grace with thinly veiled contempt and said, "About her, about your choice of wife. A powerful man needs a woman who reflects his status, who understands our culture, our ways, someone who opens doors instead of closing them." Minjun said weakly, "She's my wife, Mother. She stood by me when everyone else left." Hyjin leaned forward, her voice sharp as a knife. "She was your charity case, your burden during hard times. But those times are over now. You need to think about your legacy, about the family name, about what kind of woman will stand beside you when you reach the top." Minjun didn't defend Grace. Not once. Not ever. He just sat there in silence while his mother poisoned his mind with seeds of doubt and shame. Then Jaiwoo returned like a ghost from his past. She showed up at one of his business events, a lavish party at a luxury hotel in Gangnam. She was elegant and poised in a designer dress that probably cost more than Grace's monthly salary. Jaiwoo's timing was perfect, calculated with precision. She had been watching Minjun's rise from a distance, waiting for exactly the right moment to reappear. She approached him with a champagne glass and said smoothly, "Congratulations, Minjun. I always knew you'd rise again. I never doubted your potential." Minjun said coldly, trying to maintain his composure, "You left when I had nothing. You said I was going nowhere, remember?" Jaiwoo leaned in closer, her perfume expensive and intoxicating, and replied with practiced vulnerability, I was young and foolish and scared. I made a terrible mistake, but I see clearly now you were always meant for greatness, and I was too blind to see it. Can you forgive me? Minjun asked, his resolve already weakening, and now you want back in, now that the money's returned. Jaiwoo touched his arm lightly, her fingers lingering just a moment too long, and said softly, I want to be by your side where I belong, where I always should have been. I want to help you build the empire you deserve. He didn't pull away from her touch. He didn't tell her to leave. He just stood there, letting her words wrap around him like silk chains. Meanwhile, Grace sat at home, 7 months pregnant with twins, alone at the dinner table she had carefully set for two. She had cooked his favorite meal, japchae and bulgogi, had lit candles, had put on the dress he once said made her beautiful. She waited and waited. He didn't come home that night. She called his phone 17 times. No answer. She finally fell asleep at the table, her head resting on her arms, tears dried on her cheeks. Haijin and Jaiwoo began working together behind the scenes like conspirators in a palace coup. They would meet for coffee at expensive cafes in Cheongdam-dong, plotting Minjun's future without Grace in it. Haijin would say, he still feels guilty about her, but guilt fades with time and the right influence. You just need to be patient and strategic. Jaiwoo replied confidently, I know exactly how to handle him. I'll make him remember what he wanted before she came along. I'll remind him of who he's supposed to be. The ex-girlfriend started appearing more frequently in Minjun's life, at his office during important meetings, at business dinners sitting beside him, in his social circle, charming his associates and allies. She was strategic and patient, never pushing too hard, just always there, always perfect, always reminding him of a life without complications. She would say casually during meetings, in our world, image is everything. The right partner can open doors to opportunities you can't even imagine. But the wrong one, well, the wrong one closes doors permanently. People judge you by who stands beside you. Minjun started believing it, started seeing Grace as an obstacle instead of an ally. At home, Grace was 8 months pregnant, her belly swollen with twin boys, her body exhausted from carrying them alone in every sense of the word. She tried one last time to reach him. She said, Minjun, can we please talk, really talk? I feel like I'm losing you. He replied irritated, scrolling through his phone, I'm tired. I don't have energy for this right now. Grace continued, her voice breaking, I feel like you're pulling away from me, like I'm not even here anymore. He said dismissively, you're being paranoid, you're emotional because of the pregnancy, just rest. She said quietly, your mother said something to me today. She said I don't belong in your world. She said I'm holding you back. Is that what you think too? Minjun snapped, his patience finally breaking. Maybe she's right. Maybe you don't understand what it takes to survive in my world. Maybe I made a mistake thinking you could. Silence filled the room like poison gas. Grace asked with tears forming in her eyes, do you still love me? Did you ever really love me? Minjun looked at her, and for a brief moment something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been regret, but it died quickly. He said, I don't know what I feel anymore. I don't know if I ever did. Then he walked out, leaving her standing there, 8 months pregnant and completely alone. Grace went into labor 3 weeks later at 2 a.m. She called Minjun 43 times. He never answered. She took a taxi to the hospital alone, pain ripping through her body with each contraction. The nurse asked, is someone coming to be with you, your husband, your family? Grace said with her voice breaking, he's busy with work, he'll come when he can. But he never came. She screamed through 18 hours of labor with no hand to hold, no voice to encourage her, no one to tell her she was strong. The twins were born at 8:27 in the evening. 2 beautiful baby boys with perfect fingers and her warm brown eyes. The nurse placed them on her chest and said, congratulations, they're healthy and beautiful. What are their names? Grace looked down at her sons and whispered, Elijah and Isaiah, their names mean the Lord is my God and salvation of the Lord, because God is all we have now. She held them close and tears streamed down her face, not from joy, but from the devastating realization that their father didn't want them, didn't want her, had already moved on to a life where they didn't exist. 3 days later, Grace was discharged from the hospital. Minjun never visited, never called, never sent money for the hospital bill that now stood at over 8 million won. A kind nurse named Lee Sunmi, a 52-year-old woman who had seen too many abandoned mothers, helped Grace pay using a hospital charity fund. Sunmi said gently, "You're not the first and you won't be the last, but you're strong, I can see it in your eyes. Don't let this break you." Grace nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She walked out of the hospital with her twins strapped to her chest, one small bag containing their few belongings. No car, no money, no help, no idea where to go. The sky opened up. Rain began to fall. Heavy, cold, relentless. That's when she saw the Merceds. That's when everything ended. Now standing in that rain, soaked to her bones, watching his taillights disappear, Grace finally understood with devastating clarity. This wasn't Minjun's idea. This was Hae-jin's masterpiece. His mother had poisoned his mind slowly and methodically over months, planting seeds of doubt and shame, watering them with constant criticism, until Min-jun believed the lie that Grace was holding him back from his destiny. The divorce wasn't his decision. It was his mother's victory. And he was too weak, too proud, too blinded by his rediscovered power to see he was being manipulated like a puppet on strings. Jaiwoo was just the pretty face, the easier option, the path of least resistance. But Hae-jin, she was the true villain of this story, the architect of Grace's destruction. Minjun married Jaiwoo exactly 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The wedding was lavish and excessive. 500 guests filled the ballroom of the Shilla Hotel, the most expensive venue in Seoul. Press coverage made it front-page news in the society sections. Every major leader from the criminal underworld attended, bringing expensive gifts and false congratulations. Hae-jin was beaming with pride, finally seeing her son married to someone she deemed worthy. Jaiwoo whispered to Minjun at the altar as cameras flashed, "This is how it was always meant to be. This is the life you deserve. We're going to build an empire together." Minjun nodded and smiled for the photographers, but when they said smile bigger, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Something felt hollow, something felt wrong, but he pushed the feeling down and told himself this was success, this was winning. Their life together looked perfect from the outside. Expensive penthouses with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. Private jets to Tokyo and Hong Kong for business and pleasure. Exclusive parties where champagne flowed like water and everyone pretended to be friends. Designer everything, from clothes to furniture to the art on their walls. But underneath the surface, cracks were forming. Jaiwoo controlled his schedule with an iron grip, deciding which meetings he attended and which he skipped. She influenced his business decisions, always pushing him toward riskier, flashier investments that looked impressive but had dangerous downsides. She wanted the appearance of wealth more than actual security. During one business meeting, Jaiwoo said, "Darling, you absolutely must invest in this new luxury resort project in Jeju. Everyone who's anyone is involved. It's the opportunity of the decade." Minjun hesitated, having actually read the proposal, saying, "The numbers don't make sense, it's too leveraged. The profit margins are razor thin. One wrong move and the whole thing collapses." Jaiwoo pouted, using the manipulation tactics that always worked on him, and said, "Don't you trust me? Don't you trust my instincts? I only want what's best for us. For our future, everyone will think you're weak if you don't take bold moves like this." Minjun gave in, signing documents he should have reviewed more carefully, convincing himself that Jaiwoo understood this world better than he did. Hae-jin noticed something during a family dinner months later. She said, "You seem distracted lately, distant. Is something bothering you?" Minjun said, trying to sound convincing, "I'm fine, everything's fine, business is good." Hae-jin asked more pointedly, "Are you thinking about her, about that woman and those children?" Minjun replied defensively, "Too quickly, no, of course not, why would I?" Hae-jin said firmly, "Good, she was nothing. She was a mistake you've corrected. You made the right choice, never look back." But late at night, when Jaiwoo slept soundly beside him in their king-sized bed, Minjun dreamed of the rain. He dreamed of Grace's face when he handed her those papers. He dreamed of twins crying, twins he had never held, never seen, never acknowledged. He woke up at 3 in the morning sweating and shaking, and the penthouse suddenly felt like a beautiful prison. He felt empty despite having everything he thought he wanted. Meanwhile, across the city, Grace's story was taking a completely different path. Kim Sang-hoon, the stranger who rescued her from the rain, became her unlikely guardian angel. After driving her to a women's shelter that first night, he visited her the next day with groceries and questions. He said, "Grace, you have 2 sons now. You cannot afford to break down. You have to survive and then thrive. What skills do you have?" Grace replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "I worked in accounting back in Atlanta before I came here, and I managed budgets when Minjun's business was struggling. I'm good with numbers. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Sang-hoon said firmly, "Strength isn't something you have. It's something you build, one day at a time, one decision at a time, and I'm going to help you build it. I know someone who needs a bookkeeper. It's not much, but it's a start." Grace looked at this kind stranger and asked, "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Sang-hoon smiled sadly and said, "Because 30 years ago someone helped me when I had nothing, and I promised myself I'd pass it forward. You remind me of my daughter. She had your strength even when she couldn't see it herself." Grace worked as a bookkeeper for a small trading company in Itaewon. The pay was minimal, barely enough to survive. She lived in a tiny one-room apartment in a building scheduled for demolition, paying month to month because she couldn't afford a deposit. The twins slept in a cardboard box she had carefully lined with blankets and old clothes to make it soft. She studied finance textbooks late at night while breastfeeding, her eyes burning with exhaustion, but her mind refusing to quit. Sometimes she had to choose between buying formula or paying rent. Sometimes she skipped meals so her babies could eat. Sometimes she sat on the floor at 2 in the morning, surrounded by sleeping twins and unpaid bills, and cried so hard her whole body shook. One particularly brutal night, Grace sat on the cold floor of her apartment, crying silently so she wouldn't wake her sons. The twins were finally asleep after hours of colic and crying. She opened her wallet and counted the money inside. 5,001, roughly $4, and rent was due in 3 days. She whispered to the empty room, "God, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I'm going to fail them. I'm going to let my babies down." Then Elijah made a soft, cooing sound in his sleep, his tiny hand reaching out as if searching for her. Grace looked at her sons, these perfect, innocent beings who depended entirely on her, and something shifted inside her chest. She wiped her tears, straightened her back, and said out loud, "No, I have to be strong, I have to be enough. Failure is not an option. These boys deserve a mother who fights." She stayed up the rest of the night creating a budget, a plan, a path forward built on hope and determination. In her second year, Sang-hoon introduced Grace to an investment group he had connections with. She started as a junior analyst, the only woman, the only foreigner, the only person in the room who had to prove herself twice as hard to be seen as half as capable. But Grace was brilliant with numbers. She saw patterns others missed, identified opportunities buried in data, predicted market movements with uncanny accuracy. Slowly, grudgingly, she earned respect. But racism and sexism hit her hard and often. Colleagues would say in Korean, thinking she couldn't understand or didn't matter enough to care, "Why did they hire her? She doesn't even understand our culture. How can she possibly understand our markets? This is just diversity hearing nonsense." Grace would overhear these comments, excuse herself calmly, go to the bathroom, lock herself in a stall, and cry for exactly 3 minutes. Then she would wash her face, fix her hair, reapply her lipstick, look at herself in the mirror and say, "They don't get to break you, you've survived worse. Now get back out there and prove them wrong." Then she would return to work with her head high. In her third year, Grace made her first major successful investment call. She identified an undervalued technology company that everyone else had dismissed. She presented her analysis with confidence despite the skeptical faces around the conference table. Her bosses took a chance and invested. 3 months later, the company's stock tripled. The firm profited significantly. Grace received a bonus of 10 million won, about $8,000, more money than she had seen in 2 years. She cried when she saw the number on the check, but this time they were tears of hope. She used that money wisely. She moved to a better apartment with actual beds for the twins. She enrolled in an online MBA program through a university in Singapore. She bought herself one good professional suit and wore it to every important meeting, getting it dry cleaned weekly, making it last. Her fourth year, something completely unexpected happened that changed everything. A lawyer from Atlanta contacted her through the U.S. Embassy. A distant relative Grace had never met, her great-aunt Margaret Chen on her mother's side, had passed away at 89 years old. Margaret had been a Chinese-American woman who married a black serviceman after World War II, faced brutal discrimination, built a successful dry cleaning business through sheer determination, and never had children of her own. The inheritance was Margaret's entire estate, worth $500,000. Grace couldn't believe it. She asked the lawyer in confusion, "Why me? I never even met her. I didn't know she existed." The lawyer explained, "Margaret followed your story through family letters your grandmother sent. She knew about your marriage, your struggles, your twins. She said in her will that you reminded her of herself, a woman who survived alone in a world that didn't want her to succeed. She wanted to give you the chance she never had." Grace broke down completely, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, and whispered to the ceiling, "Thank you, Aunt Margaret, wherever you are. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing I was worth saving." Grace didn't waste Margaret's gift. She invested the money with the same careful analysis she used at work. She researched extensively and found a struggling microfinance company that provided small loans to people traditional banks rejected, mostly single mothers, immigrants, and people rebuilding after bankruptcy. Grace saw potential where others saw risk. She used $200,000 to buy a controlling stake, then restructured the entire operation using everything she had learned. She implemented better risk assessment models, streamlined operations, built relationships with community organizations, and most importantly, she treated clients with dignity instead of suspicion. Within 18 months, the company was profitable. Within 3 years, it had expanded to 5 branches across Seoul. Grace renamed it Second Chance Financial, a name that represented her own journey and her mission to help others who needed exactly what the name promised. By year 5, Grace had become someone she barely recognized in the mirror, and she meant that in the best way possible. She was now CEO of a respected financial institution. Her bank had 12 branches and was still growing. She was featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, respected by peers who once dismissed her. Her sons were 5 years old now, bright and curious and kind, attending a good international school where they thrived. She had bought a modest but comfortable home in a safe neighborhood. She drove a reliable car. She had savings and security and peace. But more than any of that, she had rebuilt her sense of self-worth from the ground up. One morning at breakfast, Elijah asked innocently while eating his cereal, "Mommy, how come some kids at school have daddies who pick them up and we don't have a daddy?" Grace set down her coffee and knelt beside her sons. She said calmly, "Because some people choose power and pride over love and family, your father made choices that took him away from us. But that doesn't mean you're missing anything. You have me, and I will always choose you. I will always be here." Isaiah, the quieter twin, asked, "Are you sad about it, about Daddy not being here?" Grace smiled softly, a real smile, and said, "I was sad for a long time, but now I'm grateful, because losing him taught me that I never needed him. I needed to believe in myself, and now I do, and I'm teaching you two to believe in yourselves too. That's worth more than any father who doesn't want to be here." She kissed both their foreheads, and they went back to eating, satisfied with her answer in the way only children can be. While Grace was rising, Minjun was falling, and he was falling fast. The luxury resort investment Jaiwoo had pushed turned out to be a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. The developers took everyone's money and disappeared overnight. Minjun lost 5 billion won, roughly $4 million, money that wasn't even entirely his but belonged to the syndicate. In an emergency meeting, the syndicate leader, an old man named Cho Di-young who had known Minjun since childhood, said with deep disappointment, "You've made reckless moves based on emotion instead of strategy. You've gambled with our collective resources. You've lost our trust and our money. That's unforgivable in our world." Minjun pleaded desperately, "I can fix this. Give me time. Give me another chance. I'll make it right." Cho said firmly, "No, you're out effective immediately. Your rank is stripped. Your protection is gone. You're on your own now, just like before." Minjun's entire world collapsed in that moment. Jaiwoo's reaction was swift and brutal. She was packing her Louis Vuitton suitcases within hours. Minjun said desperately, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" Jaiwoo said without even looking at him, "I'm leaving. Obviously, I can't be with someone who's weak and broken." Minjun shouted, "I gave you everything. I changed my whole life for you." Jaiwoo finally turned to face him, and her beautiful face was completely cold. She said, "You gave me access to everything. There's a difference. I never wanted you. I wanted what you represented, power and status and security. And now you have none of those things, so there's no reason for me to stay." She walked toward the door, then paused and added, "Oh, and your mother helped me pack. She agrees this is best for everyone." Then she left, taking half the valuables in the penthouse with her, leaving Min-jun standing alone in a home that suddenly felt empty. Hae-jin was furious beyond measure. She stormed into his penthouse and screamed, "How could you let this happen again? How could you be so stupid, so careless, so weak?" Min-jun shouted back, finally finding his voice, "You told me to marry her. You said Jaiwoo was the right choice. You said she would make me stronger. This is your fault as much as mine." Hae-jin slapped him hard across the face. She said, "I thought she would make you think clearly. I thought she would push you towards smart decisions. Instead, you became foolish and reckless trying to impress her. You destroyed everything." Minjun said, his voice breaking, "And what about Grace? What about my first wife? The one who actually stood by me when I had nothing? The one you drove away with your poison and your hatred?" Hae-jin went silent, her face pale. Minjun continued, "You destroyed my life. You destroyed my family. You made me abandon my own children because of your pride and your prejudice. And for what? For this? For losing everything anyway." He walked out, leaving his mother standing alone in the ruins of her machinations. Minjun lost everything in rapid succession. The penthouse was seized by creditors. The Mercedes and other cars were repossessed. His bank accounts were frozen by lawsuits. Friends and allies disappeared like smoke. His reputation was destroyed beyond repair. He ended up in a cheap motel room in a bad part of town, the kind of place where people paid by the hour and didn't ask questions. He sat on the stained bed, staring at an old photo on his phone that he had never been able to delete. It was a picture of Grace, 8 months pregnant, smiling while cooking dinner in their old apartment. She looked so happy, so hopeful, so full of love. Minjun whispered into the empty room, "What have I done? What kind of monster have I become?" Desperate and out of options, Minjun decided to try restarting his life legitimately. He needed money to even begin. He applied for a business loan, something he never thought he would have to do. The appointment was at a bank called Second Chance Financial. He had never heard of it. He assumed it was just another small community bank. He had no idea what waited for him inside. Minjun walked into the bank wearing a cheap suit he had bought at a discount store. The building was clean but modest, nothing like the luxury establishments he used to frequent. Professional staff greeted him politely. He was directed to the CEO's office on the 3rd floor. As he walked down the hallway, he saw a wall of framed photographs under a title that read "Our Founder's Journey." His heart stopped. It was Grace. Photos of her receiving business awards, cutting ribbons at branch openings, speaking at conferences, holding Elijah and Isaiah at a charity event for single mothers. Minjun stood frozen, staring at these images, unable to process what he was seeing. He whispered in disbelief, "No, this can't be real. This is impossible." The assistant, a young woman named Park Minjai, said politely, "Sir, the CEO will see you now." Minjun walked into the office like a man walking to his execution. Grace sat behind a large mahogany desk, elegant and composed in a tailored navy suit. She looked up from her paperwork. No shock registered on her face, no anger, no tears, just calm, professional acknowledgement. She said, "Please, Mr. Kang, have a seat." Minjun sat slowly, his hands shaking. Grace said, "You're here for a business loan, correct? What type of business are you looking to start?" Minjun couldn't speak. He just stared at her. Finally, he managed to say, "You did all this, you built all this?" Grace replied evenly, "I did what I had to do to survive and provide for my sons." Minjun said, "Our sons, Grace, they're our sons." Grace's voice became firm, edged with steel. She said, "My sons, you gave up that right the day you threw divorce papers at me in the rain, the day you chose your pride over your family. They are mine. I raised them. I fed them. I loved them. You were never there." Silence filled the office, heavy and suffocating. Minjun said, his voice breaking, "I was wrong, Grace. I was so terribly wrong, I don't even know how to begin to apologize." Grace said calmly, "Then don't. Apologies are just words, and words are cheap. I learned that from you." Minjun said, "I don't even know why I'm here. I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve anything from you." Grace stood and walked to the window overlooking the Seoul skyline. She said, "No, you don't deserve my help, but I didn't build this company to punish you or anyone else. I built it to give second chances to people who needed them, to be the person I wish had existed when I was sleeping on floors and choosing between food and rent." She turned to face him. She said, "I loved you completely, Minjun. I gave you everything I had, every piece of my heart, every dollar in my bank account, every ounce of my faith, and you threw me away like I was garbage, like I meant nothing." Minjun said, tears streaming down his face, "I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Grace said, "Sorry doesn't feed hungry children. Sorry doesn't hold their hand when they ask why their daddy doesn't want them. Sorry doesn't rebuild a shattered life. I did all of that alone while you were playing king with a woman who never loved you and a mother who poisoned everything she touched." Minjun broke completely. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. He said, "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make this right. Tell me what to do." Grace said quietly, "You can't fix this. Some things once broken can't be repaired. They can only be accepted and learned from. The question is whether you've actually learned anything or if you're just broken again and looking for someone to save you." 2 days later, Hae-jin was crossing a busy intersection in Gangnam, desperate and frantic, trying to reach a former associate who might lend her money. She wasn't paying attention, too consumed by panic and pride. A delivery truck ran a red light. She never saw it coming. The impact threw her 15 feet. People screamed. Ambulances came. She survived, but barely. Broken leg, shattered pelvis, internal bleeding, 3 cracked ribs. The hospital bills were astronomical. Over 20 million won for the surgery she needed immediately. Minjun stood in the hospital hallway, holding a phone full of contacts that refused to answer. Every ally, every friend, every person who once bowed to him now sent his calls straight to voicemail. He had nothing, no money, no credit, no options. He stood outside his mother's hospital room and watched through the window as she lay there, small and broken and finally vulnerable. A nurse said, "Sir, if the surgery isn't performed within 24 hours, she'll likely die. Do you have the funds?" Min-jun shook his head. The nurse walked away, leaving him alone with his failure. He went back to Grace. He found her at the bank late in the evening, working in her office. He knocked on the door. She looked up, unsurprised. He said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Please, Grace, I know I have no right to ask. I know I deserve nothing from you, but my mother is in the hospital. She needs surgery or she'll die. I have no one else. Everyone's abandoned me, just like I abandoned you." Grace said, "Your mother hated me. She called me every terrible thing you can imagine. She told me I was a stain on your family. A curse. She orchestrated my destruction. And now you want me to save her life." Minjun said, I know everything she did, but please, I'm begging you, not for her, not even for me, but because you're a better person than we ever were, because that's who you are." Grace stared at him for a long moment, and he couldn't read her expression. Grace visited the hospital that night. She walked into Hae-jin's room. The old woman looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, all her venom drained away by pain and mortality. Hae-jin said weakly in Korean, "Why did you come?" Grace replied in Korean, her pronunciation careful but clear, "Because your son asked me to, because I won't let someone die when I can prevent it." Hae-jin began crying, tears streaming down her weathered face. She said, "It was me. All of it was me. I told Minjun every single day that you were bad luck, that you were holding him back. I brought Jaiwoo back into his life. I planted every doubt, every cruel word, every poisonous thought. It was all me. I destroyed your marriage because of my pride. Because I couldn't accept that my son loved someone who didn't look like us, who wasn't one of us. And I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. I am the villain in this story. I am the reason everything fell apart." Grace said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, you were the villain. And yes, you destroyed lives with your hate, but I didn't come here for your confession or your apology. I came here because I don't let people suffer when I have the power to help them, even people who hurt me. That's the difference between us. You used your power to destroy. I use mine to heal." Grace signed the financial approval papers. She authorized payment for the full surgery and recovery costs. Hae-jin sobbed and said, "Why? Why would you do this for me after everything?" Grace said, "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this so that my son's father doesn't have to carry the guilt of letting his mother die. They don't need that burden. They don't need him more broken than he already is. This is for them, not for you. She walked out without looking back. Min-jun caught Grace in the hospital corridor. He said, "Please wait, please just listen." She stopped but didn't turn around. Min-jun said, his voice shaking, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can never undo what I did. The pain I caused, the years I stole from you, but I want to try, Grace. I want to be in their lives. I want to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Let me earn it. Let me prove that I've changed, that I've learned, that I'm not the same weak man who let pride destroy everything good in his life." Grace said without turning, "Changed or just broken again? How do I know the difference?" Min-jun said, "I don't know. Maybe you can't know. Maybe I just have to show you over time, but please, give me that chance." Grace finally turned around. Her eyes were unreadable. She said, "Time doesn't heal everything, Min-jun, and some wounds are too deep for second chances. You threw me away when I needed you most. You abandoned your children before they even took their first breath. You chose a life that looked good over a life that was good, and now that everything's collapsed, now you want back in." Min-jun said, "I know how it looks, I know, but I'm not asking to come back into your life. I'm asking for a chance to know my sons, to try to be something in their world, even if it's small." Grace said, "They don't even know you exist. They've asked about their father exactly twice in 5 years, and both times I told them that some people choose other things over family. They've accepted that, they're happy and secure and loved. Why would I risk that?" The elevator doors opened. Elijah and Isaiah stepped out, holding hands with Grace's assistant who had brought them to pick up their mother. They saw Grace and their faces lit up. Elijah called out, "Mommy." They ran toward her. Grace knelt and caught them in a tight hug. They noticed Min-jun standing there, this strange man with tears on his face. Isaiah asked innocently, "Mommy, who is that man? Why is he sad?" Grace looked at Min-jun, and in that moment, he saw his entire life reflected in her eyes, all his failures, all his choices, all his regrets. Elijah asked, "Should we help him? You always say we should help people who are sad." Grace stood slowly, still holding her son's hands. She said to them, "Some people need to help themselves first. Some people need to learn hard lessons before they can be helped. That's what growing up means." She looked at Min-jun one last time and said, "I'll think about it, but thinking is not promising. And even if I allow you into their lives, you'll have to earn every single moment, every single smile, every single word they speak to you. Nothing will be given, everything must be earned. Do you understand?" Min-jun nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Grace walked away with her sons, one on each side, their small hands in hers. Min-jun stood in that hospital corridor, watching them disappear around the corner, and he finally understood what he had lost. Not just a wife, not just money or status, but a family, a life built on love instead of power, everything that actually mattered. He slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor, and for the first time in his life, he truly saw himself clearly. And what he saw was a man who had everything and threw it all away for nothing. Some betrayals carve scars so deep that even apologies cannot reach them. Some regrets arrive too late to be redeemed. Some mistakes cost more than money or pride. They cost souls and families and futures. Forgiveness is not a right that anyone can demand. It is a gift, freely given or forever withheld, and only the wounded decide if it will ever be granted. Thank you for watching Black Diamond Stories. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of betrayal, karma, and redemption. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you forgive Min-jun? Does he deserve a second chance with his sons? Or has he lost that right forever? Your thoughts matter to us. Until next time, remember that your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.